Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Midwestern Marks live stream. We have the three amigos here: Noah Kratchvik, Carlos Garrido, and Eddie Liger. Me. We're excited to talk about this song that's been the talk of the town recently. Oliver Anthony, with some working class country music, at least in our perspective, and we'll answer some of the criticisms that have been hurled at this song from those who see themselves as being on the left, and we'll respond to those and break it down. But yeah, it's really interesting when a piece of art like this pops up, to see people's reaction to it, and to see like the comments in underneath the song talking about revolution explicitly. It shows that the sentiment, the revolutionary sentiment, is there in this country. So we'll get more into that as we break down the song. But for now, let's play another song, The International. All right, what's up, guys? So this is the song that we're going to be talking about, obviously. For those who are unaware, Oliver Anthony, Man North of Richmond, a country/folk song. And first of all, I just want to get your guys' initial reactions to the song when you heard it first, because I happened to not check Twitter that day, but I did check YouTube because I was doing some stuff. So I listened to the song, and I was like, okay, what a banger. Working class tune, and admittedly I didn't hear some of the lyrics that people had been criticizing on Twitter. I just didn't catch them, but I was shocked then to open Twitter later and see that a lot of leftists were against the song. So that was my introduction to it. But how about you guys?
Yeah, I liked it right away. I'm a big fan of country. If you guys couldn't tell. And Radio West Virginia has always been good at sort of finding these original singers and bands and getting them airplay in a world that's not built for that, especially when the message is so very, very against the ruling class. So, I mean, the first time I heard it, I didn't really listen too closely. I was like, yeah, it's a song about hating the ruling class. I'm down for that, and I'm really glad this is coming along right now. I don't know. What did you think, Carlos?
I mean, there's been a lot more like that recently. You have people like Uncle Lucius, who we've played on stream a few times. You have Zach Brown. You have the guy that sings Feathered Indians, who's pretty good. I can't remember the name. I don't know if you guys can. But there's been almost a revival of like working class, anti-establishment country music, and it was bound to have like one of them just pop off. And like, I think the interesting thing is not just like the song and the individual, but how it was that in this specific moment, after we've seen like a decade of country being diluted and pervaded by this weird super patriotism that's like, my country is never wrong in any of the activities that it does, even if it immiserates our people and bombs our brothers and sisters abroad. Like, what created after those 2 decades the conditions so that a song like Oliver Anthony's could just blow up literally on every platform overnight. And I think that's what like a lot of the discussion is missing. People are focusing through this purity fetish outlook on like what's imperfect about the song. Like, oh my God, it criticizes welfare. Oh my God, it criticizes like obese people or whatever the hell it might be. And that's so stupid. That has nothing to do with the Marxist outlook. We have to look at like what are the material conditions that allow an artistic form of expression such as Oliver Anthony's to blow up. Why is it resonating with the people? What's the rational kernel there? And I think it's something that we've seen over the last 4 to 8 years in electoral cycles, which is the mass of discontented people in the US that have been looking for alternatives. Some of them see the alternative in Trump. Some of them saw the alternative in Bernie. Some of them now see the alternative in RFK Jr. Some of them see the alternative in Cornel West, which is the sort of candidate that we associate with the most. Some of them see it in Marianne Williamson. And we might have our disagreements with these candidates that they end up seeing as like an alternative to the establishment, to the ruling elite, to the deep state, as some sectors call it. But sociologically, we have to observe that, as Dr. Anthony Montero has done from the Saturday Free School, like this represents a movement of the discontented masses. And this presents tremendous possibilities for Marxists. And it shows us the pregnantly revolutionary character of our objective conditions. And if we reduce any analysis that we do to, oh my God, this part of it is imperfect, or this part reiterates, Reaganite statements about welfare or whatever, we're going to be irrelevant from the standpoint of history and the movement of the movement of the people that's actually going on today. Like we can have the best theory in the world, the best ideas, but if it doesn't link up with the people, we're going to be historically irrelevant. It's people that make history. And if we're unable to link up our processes and our revolutionary theory to the actual real movement of the people overthrowing the existing state of things, we're going to be completely irrelevant. We're not going to achieve our aims as socialists.
Right. And as I was saying on the gaming stream earlier today, like, it's a popular sentiment among the working class Americans to hate taxes and then, hate people who aren't working and who are, instead on government services when they're able-bodied and able to work. So whether you like it or not, that is a popular sentiment. Would I rather he have said, we're getting taxed half our income to go to wars overseas, rather than welfare? Yes, that would have been slightly more in line with our Marxist-Leninist ideology. But I do think it's so many people jump to accuse him of victim blaming. I think Noah will have something good to say about this too. But so many people jump to accuse him of victim blaming. How do we know that he's not criticizing the system, right? Like there is criticism to be made there where so many people are disenfranchised, and so many people don't have access to jobs and things that lead to stability. So they're forced to a life of, being on government services in order to survive and living just above the poverty line. And then, the system of food production is so messed up. It gives them this processed garbage food, that has led to a major obesity crisis in this country where over 30% of the country is obese. So like, I see it less as him victim blaming and more of a systemic critique of the system and the way that the system lets people fall through the cracks without employing them and, doesn't take care of them. It pretends to take care of them by giving, here's some welfare checks so you don't literally starve so that we can keep the reserve army of labor that Marx talks about being necessary for capitalism, a reserve army of people, to unemployed people to step in if need be. But it's not truly enfranchising people. It's not truly taking care of those people. And if you listen to the totality of the song, that's clearly his message. He laments the fact that people are living on the streets with not enough to eat at other points in the song. And it's just really, really popular among the working class, too, like Carlos said. So it's important to go to where the working class is and understand why there's such a popular sentiment here. Thank you so much, Estar Bach, $20 super chat. That's huge. Thank you so much, comrade. Says he saw it on Joe Rogan's Instagram. Yes, it's getting extremely popular with normies, right? And I've always felt that Joe Rogan has, a pretty good connection, a pretty good beat on the working class, for better or for worse sometimes. But yeah, the fact that he's sharing this is huge. And Kea says, I hope you, Shea, sorry, says, I hope you can get him on the show. I agree. That would be fantastic. It'd be awesome to talk to him and even say, what do you think about U.S. imperialism? Ask him about foreign policy. Maybe ask him a tough question or two about welfare. And maybe ask him what he actually means. Are you victim blaming or are you criticizing the system? So we'll go over Kyle's super chat after. I want to let Noah talk because I know he has some good points.
Yeah, I think this gets down. I mean, we're jumping right into the one thing that the left sort of picked out as the reason to condemn it wholesale, right? And say, he's a reactionary, you need to hate him, and not understand the essence of the message of the entire song, right? People are only as good in the particular as the information we're given, right? And in the US, especially in the Midwest and in the Great Plains and in the South, you're told that if you hate the establishment, you must be a libertarian because you don't like the Democrats or Republicans. So you're naturally sort of pushed into this realm where you see all these problems, the evidence of them all around you. You feel it in your life, and then you're given all these false reasons for them, false solutions, etc. Right? And that seems like what it could be to me. And another question of this, concern for me about how the left has been viewing this is that it's so surface level, right? It just attacks what they find in form here, right? So basically they see this sort of thing that looks libertarian to them. They believe they can read his mind and what he actually means. You would not believe how often I heard the term dog whistle thrown around. I had one guy telling me that the words rich men was a dog whistle for anti-Semitism. For real.
It's just a way to accuse people of saying stuff they're not saying.
Exactly.
There are real dog whistles, but obviously that's not what you're doing.
Right, exactly. It's this sort of like they take every single thing and then turn it into something it's not, right? But let's be real about the welfare system, right? This is a bourgeois system. It is not designed to help out the working class, but to subsidize the ruling class, right? So they don't have to pay wages that people can live on, right? You know who lobbies the most for increases in welfare payouts is Walmart. Why? Because then they can pay their workers less than it costs to live on and then get those same workers to subsidize their own paychecks. And that is a messed up system. The working class of this country is in no way a fan of handouts. We're just not. Now, you can easily get anyone on board with disabled people, etc., who aren't able to work, getting some kind of assistance, right? But at the same time, when you're talking about a handout, people getting something for nothing, you are always talking about the ruling class, because it is the ruling class. Where do even these, like food stamps, where does that end up? That ends up in the bank accounts of the ruling cartels, right? And before that, where do the taxes, all of this goes to government contracts, subsidies, the incredible debt that the nation is in, all go to the financial cartels. All of it is extraction upwards, not downwards. And it is so easy when you're not being a judgmental dick to give that to people. It's just the truth. It's just how things actually are. And you can even go a step further and go, you want to know the stats on this welfare? Almost everyone on it works. Mm-hmm. Yet these bosses ain't paying enough to live on. How did we get there? That's the question. And how do we fix that? Sorry, I
It's
don't mean to ramble on.
it honestly just ends up being like a burden on the people that's grounded in the exploitation of working people. Because if the capitalists paid workers what they produce, one, they wouldn't exist, but two, there wouldn't be a need for a welfare state. So, like the origin of like welfare and government programs, it actually stemmed from capitalists not wanting to take over some of the duties of the feudal lords and passing that over to the government, and lobbying for the sake of taxation in order to do that. That's a way of them, removing the duty that they had to the people that are basically their servants, but in the modern form, they're wage slaves. Um, and I really like the comment that you give about like the way that the left has been seeing this at a very surface level. And that depicts the essence of something we've been talking about for a very long time, which is that there's a deep poverty of outlook in the people that call themselves Marxists. Like Marxism is the most advanced outlook humanity has ever been able to achieve. And the way we approach the question of like form and content is not like the traditional philosophical approach, neither the traditional quotidian approach, which is, let's just pass judgment based on the superficial appearance. That's what it seems like a lot of people are doing. But we're also not of the kind that asks simply, what's the real essence behind the appearance? Let's just get to that. We ask a question which is, not just what's the essence behind the appearance, but why did such essence need to manifest itself through such a specific form? It's a question about the relationality of both the form and the content, and why the form was the form that content needed to have in order to express itself. And that's been completely absent, because that's a critical question. It's a question about the limits of our present discourse and the limits of like a people in movement in our day and age in the U.S. In a U.S. that's riddled by crisis and a crisis of legitimacy specifically. The U.S. left, the way I think that a large chunk of it is offended specifically by the comments on the welfare state, in part because their socialism is limited to welfare state capitalism. You hear them talk about what they think socialism is. Hardly ever are they talking about the working class's conquest of political power. What they're talking about is tax the rich and have a bourgeois government give reforms that improve the working lives of the lives of working people. And although we might support these reforms in as a part of a larger revolutionary struggle, we have to be honest about the fact that this is nowhere near the aim of where we're heading. And the experience that I have had organizing for more than a decade in the Midwest is that when you approach working people with talk about tax the rich so that you can get more stuff without you having to work, it's not the sort of discourse that they like. I've been more successful in convincing working class farmers, agricultural proletariats, and regular working people, service workers in the Midwest. I've been more successful convincing them about communism, convincing them about the need for the dictatorship of the proletariat, than convincing them about Bernie when I was organizing with Bernie for some years ago, because they see that stuff as handouts. And when you restructure the way you approach the question to a question of like, it's you, the one that produces the world, everything that we see around us, it's produced by us, by people who actually work, who clock in, who clock out, who survive on the basis of their wage or of their salary. We're the ones that produce the work and that produce the world, and it's the parasites at the top who take that value and accumulate it for themselves and continue to expand and accumulate on that basis. When you talk to people on that ground and you tell them like it doesn't have to be like this is not eternal, we can change it, and there's a world in which you can be the ones with power. It is the people that produce that can be the ones that have the power, not the parasites, the bloodsuckers that and that's just a completely different discourse from the one that the left has. And the left thinks, oh my God, that's so much more radical, people are not going to accept it. And the paradox is that like people, at least in my experience, have been working people in the Midwest have been more prone to accepting that discourse than the discourse that's reduced to just let's tax the rich and let's have more social programs for the poor and working class folks. And we could support that, but um, there's also just one quick point before I hand it over to Eddie. Um, we also have to realize for these people that are treating the song through this purity fetish outlook, like there's no alternative for regular working people. when they look up and see the political horizon, what do they see? They see Republicans, they see MAGA Republicans that have the discourse of draining the swamp, of being anti establishment, anti deep state. And then they see the Democrats. And they see a faction of the Democrats that calls itself progressive, but in reality just takes the social issues that the Democrats align with and take that to an extreme and center those social issues as a part of what their politics means. And that's all they see. Sometimes they end up seeing like libertarians on the side. And so there's no large communist party in the US that can position itself officially as like an alternative amongst the rest and that people can readily find. There's no large socialist like or even social democratic party that could do that. So how the fuck are we going to ask for perfection from people that are almost like developing the way that they critique the system in a very spontaneous manner, because none of us are there to talk to them, because we haven't built the institutions, the organizations, we haven't even built the correct outlooks that would allow us to do that, because even as we think about doing that, the first instinct that comes to our mind as the communist left is canceling them because this dude said some shit about welfare and obese people. So there's so much missing that's on us. We're the backwards ones in this scenario. And we want to continue blaming working people because they don't have a more perfect outlook when we are the ones that have fucked up for generations on end. Of course, there's structural reasons for that, State Department fundings and destructions of organizations. But I'll hand it over to Eddie. I've been ranting for quite a bit.
Right, just as Noah says, it's incredibly surface level the way that a lot of people are looking at it. They hear one thing that sounds like, it might be a talking point that comes from the Republican Party, and then it's just an absolute dismissal. And even people like throwing vitriol at this guy. I saw people like calling him fat and bloated and stupid MAGA. I'm like, what are you guys fucking talking about, dude? Like, it's so surface level, and that's why my Twitter bio on my personal Twitter is "What you focus on expands." That's a quote from one of my favorite wrestling coaches. And it means like to understand something, you have to tarry with it, right? You have to take time to understand it and understand it in its totality. So I agree with that. And, a lot of people, including some people I respect and like, were criticizing the song because it criticizes taxes and the fact that working class people are heavily taxed. And it's like, it's almost like these people through the Bernie or AOC campaigns or whatever have convinced themselves that taxes are universally good. When the system of taxes, just like the system of welfare in this country, is a system of taxes based on and created by the bourgeois mode of production, right? Working people are taxed like 40% of their freaking income, and it goes to pay for endless wars and giant corporate subsidies. That is not something we should cheer on. We should not be going to these people and saying, you rah-rah taxes. I even criticize the slogan tax the rich because I think working people have such a negative association with taxes in general. But we should absolutely be saying that we want to lower working class people's taxes. Their taxes are absurdly high to pay for our bloated military budget. So I understand that people have been indoctrinated with the idea that taxes are universally good and, taxes are going to solve all our problems. But as Carlos was saying, that's a social democratic solution to the system, and it's a solution that's not really popular with the working masses. They hate taxes, and rightfully so. And I want to bring up this awesome $20 super chat from Kyle Pettis. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Thanks,
You've been really
brother.
generous lately. Says, love the song, glad you're covering it. So tired of the purity left attacking it. Again, the workers are showing they're ahead of the left through their own relation to the struggle. My union brothers all love the song, and I had the same experience logging off Twitter and hanging out with a bunch of wrestling friends yesterday. They all thought the song was awesome. They all thought the song highlighted a lot of the issues with this country. So, and, there was someone on Twitter accusing Noah of tailing the reactionary masses, or Noah and his cohort, they said. So I guess that includes us. But,
y'all are my cohort now.
Right. And I'm like, that should be a compliment. We are Marxists. We want to go to the masses. We want to go and understand why things are popular with the masses, especially if there's so much discontent, like in a piece of art like this, or so much hatred or anger directed at the ruling class and the system, like to just ignore that or to dismiss it and throw vitriol at it and talk about how it's MAGA or whatever, is to ignore why the working class likes the song, which is because it's a song against the system. It's a song against the ruling class. It's a song against the rich men north of Richmond, the Washington, D.C. Politicians who serve the ruling economic class, the capitalist class. I also want to say thanks to Leo. Says, thanks for streaming right now. I was bored watching a debate between a flat earther and a physicist. I had to chug vodka to bear it. That made me laugh out loud. Thank you to Dog Eater for becoming a member. Thank you again to Leo. Duck Hash Browns, thank you so much. Constant viewer and super chatter. All we can do is hope that Daddy Bezos donates to our charities, right? That's basically the world that social democrats are pitching. All that we can hope for is to tax Daddy Bezos a little bit higher so that 40,000 people aren't dying due to lack of health care every year. And then another one from Dog Eater, and who really doesn't like cars. So thank you, Dog Eater. Oh, and one from Penis Dragger. Thank you so much, Penis Dragger. I feel like many libertarians are just 3 XP away from living up anarchic disdain for the state to identify class consciousness. Exactly, my friend. And that is why we need to do streams like this, right? That is why we need to be there, to give them a theoretical understanding and say capitalism and its contradictions are the reason for your struggles. And, the dictatorship of capital that is our government is the reason for your struggles. But the solution isn't just to believe that we can anarchically and utopianly dismantle the state and have no government and have perfect capitalism, right? Our system today is a product of capitalism's development for many years. And the solution is to go to socialism. But we're not going to convince people to go to socialism by looking at the songs that they like against the government and just calling them evil and bad and canceling them. We have to re-articulate people's consciousness towards socialism, as Carlos is fond of saying.
1000%, brother. I think what really grinds my gears when they sort of shit on all of this because nothing is good enough for these, leftists who found out what the hammer and sickle is last year, right? You said that you quoted the one guy saying we were tailing the reactionary masses. They use all of these old terms without knowing what they mean. And this is why we talk about them thinking all on the surface. One, they can't look under that surface appearance of a thing to really understand what its essential content is, what it actually is. They see only this form, right? Rather than what's underneath. They can't sort of lift up the hood of the car. So like if we're all standing in front of this broken down car, right? They're pointing at the car saying it must be evil. That's why it's not running. And we're like, well, why don't we lift up the hood, see what's going on and fix it, right? Get it running again. But when they talk about tailing, tailism is not going to the masses, right? It is not taking the rational kernel that they already have because they are inherently revolutionary as working class people, just in their class nature, and then sort of reformulating that same rational kernel so that the solution is the real one, which is socialism. What tailism is sort of what the right opportunists want us to do with the Democrats, right? Or going to demonstrations and just saying yay, rather than taking this revolutionary momentum and leading and pushing it further into a revolutionary direction. I want to say 2 more things. One, thank you so much, Kyle, for the super chat. Kyle was on our live stream. We talked to him about the amazingly revolutionary demands of the UAW, who may be going on strike next month. And I hope we see a lot more of Kyle in the future. Lastly, taxes and Trump, right? You were talking at the very beginning, Eddie, about working class people hating taxes, right? And this is way more prevalent in the working class, and especially within people who vote Trump, right? It's only in the middle class that genuinely aren't bothered by these taxes that they're such a big fan of thinking taxes solve everything, right? It is the working class who already can't afford groceries that genuinely need the tax burden lifted. And so when Trump came along, and all they get told from the left was we'll increase taxes, right? And government programs. And Trump came along and said, like, I know for a fact that the ruling class doesn't pay taxes because I don't pay taxes. And I know what loopholes they use because I use them. That right there is a perfect encapsulation on why he succeeded in gaining support in the working class, and communists of the last period have unambiguously failed because they do not go to where the working class is. Instead, they scold them for not being what they consider enlightened. And I, for one, am sick of it. If you look at I actually just watched the movie Oppenheimer today, right? I took my son to see it, and it's set in a period with a very active communist party. And you can see the government going after them, and you can see how active they were and how popular they were because they weren't doing this at that time. This is that pre-war or post-war period when they had self-criticized about being mostly petty bourgeois elements and went to the masses and done what we were talking about, redirecting their already revolutionary kernels of thought towards the correct answers, right? Not scolding them, blah, blah, blah. And that's all it takes to succeed, is not being an asshole.
Absolutely, man. And to be honest, as someone that's not really on social media or not very active, I tweet here and there from the Midwestern Marks account. But when I went on and after hearing the song and saw the reactions of the left, we were texting each other about some of the replies to Noah's quote tweet. I couldn't believe it. After hearing the song, I literally could not believe it. Because if you're disconnected from all this online bullshit and you genuinely align yourself with Marxism, with the struggle for socialism, and you hear a working class dude at this moment when the crisis of legitimacy and the immiseration of the people goes so deep, where it crosses the color line, and everyone who's working class feels what's going on. If you hear a song like that and you see its success and it's blowing up and it's going viral on every platform, and the first thing you say is, oh my God, there's 2 or 3 lines here about welfare that I disagree with. It was even hard to calculate in my head what sort of, how do you go about identifying as a Marxist, socialist, leftist, whatever it might be, and then take that reaction. It's so completely absurd. And it's just another form of manifesting the same reaction the left has had over the last 8 years to the Trump movement. They've ignored everything. They've ignored the statistics that, like in the most red counties in the Midwest and in parts of the South, there were counties that went Obama, Obama, Trump. Why did that happen? Did they suddenly all turn into white nationalists and fascists? Is that what happened? Is that what, like, Occam's razor would tell us, or a Marxist analysis would tell us that happened? No, it's been a continuous failure and a real form of theoretical tailism, where they get all of their insights about what the fuck is going on from the New York Times and the liberal press. So their analysis has nothing to do with Marxism, and then it manifests itself when this song goes viral from a working class dude preaching the fact that the working class is ignored, that our lives have been destroyed, that we're immiserated, that our future is bleak, and that the ruling elite and their political puppets don't represent us. Instead of praising this and praising like the historical moment that has allowed this to blow up, and how it resonates with people as a fact that shows how revolutionarily pregnant our moment is. Instead of doing that, they've scolded. They've scolded this man. They've scolded the few on the left and the few progressives who have, lauded what a tremendous like moment this signifies. And it goes to show something that we've been so outspoken of, and that in many ways was the reason why we founded Midwestern Marx, which is that the left is just it's I don't even know if you could call it a left anymore. What traditionally demarcated what left and right was left was the progressive forces, the people that stood with the advancement of history, with moving history forward. And that's not at all what the left in the US is doing. It's setting us back, it's alienating us from the masses, and the ruling class loves it. The ruling class loves it. In a moment of crisis, they don't want anything more than the only people who have the actual solution to be alienated from the people that can make that solution a material force and bring about a new society and their downfall.
And do you think the ruling class loves this song? Like, do you think they love that these are the comments? Well, Carlos found one comment explicitly calling for revolution. But this is not a song. It's an anthem for 80 million Americans who have been smeared, ignored, mocked, slandered, and robbed by their own government. Amen. Worked hard all my life, factories and such. My husband too. He was a coal miner at one time. He passed away at 51. This widow is now only 62 and on disability from all those good paying jobs I have. I love this song. Thank you. You have an amazing voice. There's someone on disability. There's someone on government programs, who loves the song. This is the sentiment of the working class, right? And it's completely opposite from the sentiment of the left. This is someone who's on government programs. And they're not like, oh, you mentioned that, some people are milking welfare. I hate this song. No, it touched her because her and her husband have grinded their whole life, and she realizes this guy isn't shitting on people like her. That's not the essence of his message here. Thank you so much for the song. I'm a 60-year-old man. I just broke down and cried while in the shower. I love God. I love our country and our people. God bless you and thank you kindly. U.S. military vet and 35 years retired utility worker here. You hit the bullseye with this one, bro. All of us are stepped on by these political hogs every damn time we turn around. Thanks for the song and giving these crooks a heads up that we aren't going to take it anymore. Rock on, brother. You think the ruling class likes this shit? You think the ruling class likes an entire comment section full of working class Americans talking about how we're not going to be stepped on anymore? Of course not. They hate that. You know what they love? When the Chapo Trap House guys get on Twitter, and say that this song's evil and that song's bad and all this revolutionary sentiment in the comments is just MAGA people. That's what they love because that's divisive, right? And that's divorcing people who are politically conscious or people who want to move politics forward, who consider themselves leftists, from the ruling class. From the working class and revolutionary sentiment among the working class. Kyle says some great developments on the front line that I would love to hop on and discuss. Oh, for sure, comrade. Thanks, Kyle. Thank you so much for the $10 super chat. And yeah, we're seeing this revolutionary sentiment in art reflects revolutionary sentiment on the ground. I was at a picket today, and it was some workers who had walked and yesterday, and it was some workers who had walked out because of an abusive manager who was yelling at them and calling them the devil and stuff. But it wasn't just those workers who showed up at the picket. It was all these people from the community holding up signs that say end the war on workers because people are tired of this. And there were people with Make America Great Again hats who were honking and pulling up and saying, we love good workers. There is revolutionary sentiment among the working class, and we cannot divorce ourselves from it because Mehdi Hassan and the other bourgeois ideologues on MSNBC tell you that all of these people are just fascists.
Noah, can I give a quick point?
No,
just real quick to piggyback off of what Eddie just said.
Of course, go ahead.
When these people that were on the picket line, and that's why we criticize the PMC. People don't get it sometimes. They're like, oh, they get salaries, they get wages. Why do you criticize them? No. But when these people who work 9 to 10 hours a day, to live still in poverty and in miseration, to not have insurance. But when they see a manager like that, say those things to them, they see the manager in part as an enemy. And when they go online, and everyone has social media today, and if they happen to engage in political discourse, what political part of the spectrum ends up resembling more the relationship that they have to their manager? What sort of people on the political spectrum online end up canceling others and calling them the devil for minute things? Unfortunately, it is this anti-left left. And that's not to say that there aren't people on the right that because you're gay or something, they end up calling things satanic and shit like that. Of course there is as well. But in general, it's been such a toxic culture where any small disagreement that people who consider themselves left online find in regular people, they just cancel them. They call him the devil. They call him a whole host of horrific things. And for working people, that ends up resembling not their coworkers, it resembles their managers and their bosses. And you got to be fucking crazy if you think that interacting with regular people like that is going to make them want to follow you and give you the capacity to lead them.
Well, you cut out at the word capacity, brother.
Just give
No,
you the
I heard it.
capacity.
I think yours cut out now.
Maybe it was just for me. All right. Well, yeah, it's wild. And we say this all the time. The left, which is really this fake manufactured left created in the last period of our country's history, is a middle class left. And they treat everything like an HR meeting, right? And so when working class people see that sort of superior attitude that looks down on them, fundamental social chauvinism, that is the new form of social chauvinism. It is the middle class looking down on the entire working class for one reason or another. And the particularity it takes is just situational, right? When it's working class people who grow up in a conservative area, right? Then they're all ignorant, racist hillbillies. In fact, you even see them sort of padding stats and misrepresenting voting statistics and all kinds of stuff to make it seem like actually all of them are just rich people anyway, which is so not true. I mean, look at the popularity of this song, and you can see that right there. 60% of this entire country struggles paycheck to paycheck. That means everybody. But what I really want to get into is this purity fetish left focus on the one thing they disagree with. If we're talking about concrete political organizations and their support, what does that opinion even matter? If I can win that guy's support, and I guarantee you, if I'm running a political campaign, I can win that guy. I win that guy at work. I've won that guy over at work for the last 10 years. I know what I'm doing with this thing. But if you can win that guy's support, you don't even need to change his opinion. And that's one of the issues with this social chauvinism of the middle class these days, the liberal middle class, is they want to, and he says this in the song, control everything down to what people think, right? They need you to agree with them. And when you don't, they go bananas, and will begin taking that little kernel of disagreement. And no matter what it is you actually say, turning it into something wildly different, right? If you say all Americans are harmed by imperialism, they will go, what, you think you're better than someone in the third world? You don't think you benefit from imperialism? And they do the whole left-wing trickle-down economics thing, right? They take what you say and twist it into something unrecognizable so they can rationalize that middle class prejudice of a superiority complex.
And let me say something too, and then you can jump in, Carlos. But for those who don't know, the socialists and the indigenous movements, which are, have been combined in Latin America, in Bolivia, in Venezuela, in Peru recently, are oftentimes attacked by the middle class or the upper middle class and the people in the city centers as being hicks, right? As being backwards, as being, country folk. And that's tied in with racism and bigotry towards the indigenous populations. But I sent something very similar here with the sentiment that a lot of leftists, middle class or, coastal leftists, giving to this southern working class guy singing a song about his political grievances, right? It's like, you stupid hick, why don't you have all the correct positions according to the middle class PMC left? It's very similar to how they smear Hugo Chavez, very similar to how they smear Pedro Castillo. Nicolas Maduro, all these people were smeared as just dumb hicks who were too stupid to understand how the political system works, compared to the enlightened bourgeois or middle class sock dems or neoliberals.
Exactly what they did to the Bolsheviks.
Right. And it comes from their class position, as Noah says. It's the mostly the liberal middle class crapping on the southern working class.
I couldn't have put that any better. And when we interviewed Sebastian Leon, a philosophy professor in Peru, about the situation in Peru, the same thing came to my mind. The way that this cosmopolitan left, middle class left, white left, because class is so racialized in Peru, and the center, the Lima, and everything else is also a form of classifying people through class, but. What instantly came to mind is how, like, the coastal left talks about the heartland and the Midwest, and it's. I mean, I grew up in South Florida before I went to college. I had those biases. I got into college right on the precipice of the election of Trump. And all the people that I had hung out with in South Florida, the progressive Bernieites, they all said, "Oh my God, you got a bunch of fascists over there. Be careful. You got a bunch of racist white nationalists. Be careful. It's not going to be the same thing as here in South Florida." Honestly, I had maybe met 4 to 5 white people by the time I got to college. So it was different. But I found people that were hospitable as shit, nice as fuck, that had certain values that were even more progressive than a lot of the stuff that I held when I was in South Florida. A very consumerist ethic. I related happiness to buying the latest Jordan sneakers and starter jackets and shit. And that wasn't what you found in the Midwest, right? It was, in many ways, in terms of values, a lot more people-centered. So those coastal and cosmopolitan biases about Central America are just false. And I doubt if any of these people have actually gone there and spent a significant amount of time there, because it wasn't, the first day where I realized this. It was a quantitative amount of situations that led me to realize, okay, yeah, all the shit that they told me about these people, even the ones that voted Trump, is bullshit. Like, these are well-meaning people who care about their families and their communities and want the best for their families and their communities, and realize the existing order is fucked up. And only socialists have the answers, but socialists are too busy condemning them as fascists or backwards or whatever the fuck. And it's completely contrary to the traditions of socialism that we have in our country, the most advanced traditions, the tradition of the Communist Party, the tradition of Du Bois and Winston and Gus Hall and Aptheker and many others, who have been at the front lines of the struggle against racism, who have seen the struggle against racism as a class struggle, but who didn't take that fact that divided the working class as a reason to cancel the majority of our working class, which is white, at a time when the racism that existed is not even comparable to what we have today. Like, I was talking to Noah about this. I've stayed a long time both in the Midwest and various cities in the Midwest, small towns in the Midwest and in the South. And the idea that a workplace wouldn't get organized because white workers wouldn't want to organize with black workers in the South or in the Midwest it's just a situation I can't even think about. It has no connection to the reality of poor and working class white people that I have met. And I guess I'm white in South Florida. I'm white in Miami. In the Midwest, I'm not technically white. I'm a former Hispanic white. I just don't see it. And these people are carrying around an analysis as if it's 1960, when of course there's certain biases that still exist in some regions of the country, but the conditions for working people fighting together are better than they have ever been. We're closer to being that to embodying that reality of a one that's made of many, and that gets its uniqueness and its richness out of that plurality that functions within the one. And
And
I think events like events like the Black Lives
real
Matter
quick,
protests and other events where black people get killed. You go to these protests, they're not protesting, oh my God, they killed someone else. They're protesting as if they killed one of us, because they did. And that's a tremendous transformation in the social consciousness of a people. And it gives us a better potential to struggle for socialism and to uniting the working class in that struggle than we've ever had. And the left is just completely missing out on this.
right. And I do want to almost push back a little bit, or not push back, but say, as someone who grew up in the rural Midwest, there are bigoted attitudes among working class people and among agricultural workers, and those are to be combated, and those are a problem. Those are divisive when it comes to organizing, right? If people genuinely hold divisive attitudes towards other races. But what you'll find is almost nobody has serious political positions that are based off of bigoted attitudes, right? There's no one saying, I'm not going to organize my workplace, or I'm not going to join a union because I have black coworkers. I've never heard of that in my life. What I've heard is, people making like bigoted or insensitive jokes, right? And to the extent that busts up class solidarity, yeah, it's to be combated for sure, and there are things to be combated there. But there's very few people who, in today's day and age, make serious political positions based off of racism. And when it's usually like incel kids who are terminally online in these gaming communities. That's where I see a lot of the fascism. That's where I see a lot of the, legit racism and people putting the double lightning bolts in their bio. I don't see it with farm workers or people in the Midwest. I mean, and like when at my school growing up, there was a fight between Hispanic kids and white kids. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that kind of bigotry that leads to division of people who are all working class and who are all impoverished, I'm all for combating that and combating that where it exists. But it's not that hard to combat. You can, dissect these things in people's brains, break them down for them, show them how capitalism is the problem, not any one group of people. And if you just dismiss them and cancel them, they're just going to go talk to other people who hold the same bigotries. Right. So there's importance in going there and connecting with these people.
What I think is strange is how these sort of fake leftists, and let's be clear, it's almost all from the remnants of the middle class, but the reproletariat can really have problems with this too. But that's also the stratum that these sort of edgy incel sort of watching Nick Fuentes people are, right? It's the same class position. But what really drives me crazy is, how do these fake leftists expect to organize a revolution when they can't even convince anyone of the need for socialism? The idea of socialism is not nationally accepted, not yet, right? And so if you can't take someone who doesn't already agree with you and make them agree with you, then the problem isn't on them, it's on you, because socialism is objectively true. It is objectively the answer to the problems of the working classes, right? The proletariat and reproletariat. So if you can't explain that truth and those facts to other working class people, the problem isn't theirs. The problem is yours, right? And you need to get better at your job, right? I used to be that same way, dismissing people, calling them backwards, misusing the word reactionary, etc. And guess what? I didn't fuck you a single person into being a communist. I didn't fuck you a single person into supporting a dictatorship of the proletariat. I didn't fuck you a single person into reading Marx and Engels. You know what worked? Not being that cartoon that the media, this super sophisticated institution of the ruling class designed to get them to hate you, tells them you are. When you fulfill that cartoon, it gets their psychological defenses up. They will dismiss every single thing you say. You will be the enemy in their eyes. You have to be on the same team. You have to win them over because they're not already agreeing with you. Someone please time out Reclaimed. I'm sick of him right now. I gave you 2 warnings, brother. You kept going. Sorry.
And just to be clear, because I see some people in the comments, this isn't like an anti-urban or anti-city or like obviously organizing the cities. I've done it, and it's there's a lot of potential there as well. What I'm talking about is a certain form of liberal cosmopolitanism that usually appears in the coastal regions of the country and in the major cosmopolitan cities that has this sort of projection of backwardness onto poor working people in the middle of the country and in other poor non-cosmopolitan, non-metropolitan areas. That's what I'm talking about. And just to be clear, the struggle against racism, and this is a big mistake in the left, and it's been a huge problem in the history of socialism. It gets corrected by Du Bois and by a tradition within the Communist Party. The struggle against racism and against other forms of bigotry that divide working people are not separate struggles where you have the class struggle here against capital, and then over here you have another struggle. Marx used to say that racism and bigotry is the secret of the ruling class through which they're able to divide workers from each other. And this comes specifically in his writings on English workers and their bigotry against the Irish. And it could be easily applied to other forms of bigotry and the forms of bigotry and racist false consciousness that we find in our country. When those things appear, they're not just class struggles or struggles for justice and equality. They're class struggles. They're not just racial. They're class struggles. When you're fighting against an ideology that divides working people in order to sustain a capitalist order and to sustain the ruling class in power, that fight is not just for racial justice. It is for that, but it's not reducible to that. It is a genuine class struggle. And the people that can't see those fights as class struggles, what they actually do have is, as some callers have argued, is a white blind spot. They only ever see class struggle when they see white people in factories fighting against the boss. And that's not the case. That's the position that I have, that the struggle against racism is a class struggle. Let me just clear that up. And what I'm talking about is that at this moment, try to find a part in the country where white working people do not want to organize with coworkers who are not white in order to fight to improve their conditions. Try to find that. That's not to say that bigotries don't continue to exist, but the form of racism that existed in the working class that benefited the dominant capitalist class and that prevented working class unity in the struggle for socialism. Try to find that today. Try to find that today. I don't think it is likely that you will. And what that means is that whatever bigotries are sustained by one part or another of the working class, they are more easily overcome through class struggle, through their cross-pollination with workers of other stripes than it's ever been in the history of American society.
And let's be clear, that's exactly how it used to be. Without the Communist Party's fight, unions wouldn't have been integrated. The Communist Party was actually the first integrated political organization in the country. And when Carlos says that the struggle against racism is a class struggle, I want to explain what he means by this. Theoretically, It is a struggle of the working class against the ruling class that pushes our society forward, historically, pushes us forward in history, right? The Third American Revolution was a political revolution, the civil rights movement. It changed social relations in this country forever, forever. Before that, there were white sort of enclaves that would expel black workers from it, right? And the bosses were experts at using those against each other and playing on the tensions between these races and playing it up in order to fight against the class struggle. And William Z. Foster talks about this, right? And he says that in the steel struggle leading up to the Great Steel Strike, the bosses were bringing in specifically black scabs because these white workers had this racial false consciousness, right? And so what they saw was these black workers taking their jobs and making their working against their organization. And the black workers saw all these racist guys and didn't care what they thought, so they went and scabbed, right? It's like a whole thing of always the bosses playing against this. And Foster was prophetic, and he was saying that if we do not do something, they will turn this into a full-on race war. And that's what they were trying to do. And what happened? The most advanced sections of our working class led and brought us to the civil rights movement, right? I just had to say that. That's all. Oh, one last thing. Jay Sakai, one of the anti-communist leftists, also misquotes Foster in this writing and tries to paint him as racist for that. Does that remind you of anyone nowadays?
Can I just say something real quick, Eddie, about what Noah just said?
Yeah.
The civil rights revolution, again, you can't understand the U.S. today or U.S. history without understanding it. And again, the way that people on the left have usually understand it is simply as a struggle for political equality, as a very limited scope of a political revolution. And what they fail to see is that it's through and through a class struggle. It is through and through a class struggle, and the victories that it achieves, especially in the South, that had basically a form of fascism since the counter-revolution of 1876. The victories that it achieves for working class people in the South are just tremendous. It's a class struggle, and it's a struggle at the same time for the emancipation of this de jure underclass that had been created by a very racialized form of capitalism that was needed in order to divide workers. And now the best form that the ruling class finds to continuously divide workers is by developing this ideology that does the complete opposite, that divides us ontologically, but from another perspective, by considering that all white workers are evil or whatever the hell it might be. And it comes directly from the university. It gets trickled down through NGOs and the media. And it's fundamentally what makes the left anathema to regular working people. It makes them unable to unite them because through the veneer of being the most woke or the most progressive, what they're actually proliferating is divisions in the people instead of unity.
And that's such an important history there too to give, and I appreciate you guys for doing your deep study of Du Bois and of Reconstruction and the counter-revolution, because that's so vital to understanding our conditions. So I appreciate that. I think we should jump in now. We've spent about an hour talking about this song. I want to jump into a related More Perfect Union video where they went to a Trump rally and talked to people. Kyle says, yeah, very few people in the workplace want to organize based on, or are prevented from organizing based on bigotry. Yeah, that's what I was making the point too. Like, you'll see those bigoted sentiments or racial sentiments sometimes or that take the form of jokes, but you don't get people who are against organizing or take serious political positions based on racism other than in weird online alt-right communities. When UAW was forged, this was the case. Ford brought in black workers from the South and had them on one line and whites on another, trying to make them fight. When the union came in, they joined hands. Badass. What a story. Thank you, Kyle. And that's exactly what we got to do. You know, a meme. There's a meme that says this is what the working class, or this is what the ruling class hates, and it's like a black guy and then like a farmer or something saying, "I got your back." And it was something like the left shit all over, and they're like, you know, this is so stupid. This is reactionary right-wing garbage. It's like, what? You know, white working class people and black working class people coming together to fight the ruling class. Is that not what we want? You know, do you actually believe that there are some inherent divisions between white and black people to where they can't get along? It as Vivek Chibber said in our interview with him, it boils down to just race essentialist ideology. Which Marxism is the ultimate debunk of. So I'll let Carlos go, and then we'll get into this video.
Well, real quick before that, Carlos, I'm sorry. That's exactly what they think. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that is the center of their ideology, is that there is some division between races that is unbridgeable. That's all.
I'm just kidding. That was a good point. I'm just giving you crap.
And you know, we've talked about this before. We got into it with we got into the topic with Vivek Shibber about how, in terms of philosophical assumptions, a lot of these more quote unquote woke outlooks share the same assumptions, the same race essentialist assumptions as old school racism and race science. And you know, this is all rooted in whiteness studies, which claims itself to be rooted in the work of Du Bois, but it couldn't be any farther from the work of Du Bois. And what it ends up doing is ontologizing, so eternalizing, making the idea that, you know, the racism that exists in poor white working people is an essential component of their very being, right? It ontologizes these things, and in so doing, it proliferates through a woke veneer divisions. It proliferates divisions instead of doing what the old theorists of how whiteness prevents working class unity, how whiteness is used as a form of racist false consciousness to get white workers to identify with their whiteness and not with their class. They didn't Du Bois never ontologized it. He considers it in part a folly that a certain portion of the white working class identified with the white owners of capital instead of with the black workers who they had infinitely more in common with. And the struggle was understand the difference so that you can overcome it, so that you can unite the people. That was the framework of
Carlos,
a Du Boisian science that aimed not just at understanding the world, but at radically transforming it. And the whiteness studies of today, which are rooted in the 80s, David Roediger and a bunch of other people, they do the complete opposite of that. They just ontologize whiteness.
Can you explain what ontologizing means? I think you're just because I have no fucking idea, and I
So
consider myself pretty smart in the brain.
The thing I said after ontologize was my attempt at explaining it. They eternalize it. They consider like this whiteness ideology, the identification with whiteness, to be an essential component of the very being of regular white working class people. So instead of seeing it as a historically developing phenomenon that the ruling class develops and proliferates in order to divide working people, right, and that can be overcome through class solidarity, instead they consider it to be an essential component of working class white American people. Or they say things such as it's an essential component of America, it's in the DNA of America. Such things, when you do that, you ontologize this ideology of whiteness and racism and white supremacy, which all it really means is that you have made it a fundamental component of the very being of X thing. And even that idea is itself already, for the people that have these mistakes and that claim to be Marxist, it's already deeply anti-Marxist, because any Marxist ontology, any Marxist theory about the essential constitution of a thing always has to see that already in its movement and in its potential to turn into something else through its development and through the internal and external contradictions that it encounters in that process of development.
Well, it's already anti-Marxist even before that, in ontologizing it. And the best way I've ever heard the word ontologize used is as the building block of a thing. Without that, the thing doesn't exist. But where does racism come from Marxism? If we actually apply a Marxist view to American white supremacy and racism, it arrives from the British slave trade. It arises out of instituting or building the institutions of chattel slavery. Slavery itself is not the product of racism for Marxism, but racism instead is the product of slavery. That is the Marxist view. And this is a danger of Marxism being manipulated and left behind in the last period of our history. Because people are under the impression that this modern bourgeois sort of woke theories that get all this stuff wrong are Marxist or are compatible with Marxism when their sort of entire way of viewing everything in the entire world is anti-Marxist.
For sure. Let's jump into this video now because I announced that we were going to jump into it a while ago. This is pretty interesting here from More Perfect Union, who I really like. I do want to show this meme too, just because I thought it was kind of funny and some of our buddies liked it. If this triggers you, but this doesn't, then you're not a leftist. AOC advocating for sunscreen versus this working class person from the heart of America singing his heart out about corrupt politicians. Yeah, it's a good meme, dude.
Sunscreen regulation.
People replied as if you know, we put out a tweet saying, you know, America, AOC, please fight for the Medicare for all that you campaigned on and that we elected you on. AOC, the best we could do is sunscreen, and we tweeted that out, and the AOC apologists and the DSAers, their first thing was like, you don't think sunscreen is good? You don't think sunscreen regulation is good? You think skin cancer is good? Are you fucking stupid? Are you fucking stupid? I'm saying it's bad to campaign on Medicare for all and then just give us sunscreen. I'm not saying sunscreen is bad. You fucking idiot. Jesus.
Oh my
By the
god.
way, look at the asshole face she's making right now. Like that's the face of an asshole. There is no one who isn't an asshole that does that in a public video.
Sounds like the comments of a sexist. All right, let's finally jump into this damn video. You anti-sunscreen, obese welfare leeches.
No audio.
This is a Trump rally, by the way. Yeah. I'll restart it. My audio's off. The host. Oh, okay.
By the way, all you got to tell this first guy is that, yeah, communism does work. I can tell you how.
Exactly.
And he's there. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't want to give spoilers.
No, you're good. You're good.
Socialism, obviously, we'll all agree communism doesn't work. Yeah. But extreme capitalism, as we're seeing right now, does not work. This corporate capitalism also has its problems.
How much money is too much money for one person? It's a tough call. I know. When they have these billions, you're like, well, they really don't need it. Yeah, we agree with that. Why Trump instead of Bernie Sanders?
What I look at is more progressives like the Bernie Sanders faction, stuff like that.
Oh, by the way, this guy is an amazing TikToker.
We don't need it. Yeah, we agree with.
We're pretty good buddies on TikTok. He lives in the deep South. He's a bartender. He lives above his bar in the South, and he is always stressing the same kind of stuff that we're stressing in this video. That working class people who come into his dive bar in the South say some dumb things, say some misguided things, but overwhelmingly the popular sentiment is against the ruling class and is against capitalism.
Bernie Sanders.
What I look at is more progressives like the Bernie Sanders faction, stuff like that. We actually see a lot of the same problems.
And I would vote for a Bernie Sanders before I vote for like a Ted Cruz or a Marco Rubio.
What would it have taken for you guys to not go into the rally and to instead get ice cream with me, a flaming leftist?
Well, first of all, you'd have to buy.
All right, I'm buying. We are polarized. There is no doubt about it. But I came to this Trump rally on a hunch. I've poured drinks at a Rust Belt dive bar for the last year, and when your county votes for Trump and the bartender looks...
Haha, I called it. I told you we're friends.
...looks like I do, people kind of assume that you're on the same page. But sometimes you actually are. So here's my hunch. For all the focus on culture war issues, the working class on the left and the right have a lot more in common than we're led to believe.
And show the mullet.
It could.
Show the mullet.
Mullet gang, baby. Shake it out.
Look at
Let's
that Midwest
buy.
mop.
Business in the front, party in the back. Economic planning in the front, revolution in the back.
And should
We're gonna
have
do a socialism heads thing, but with mullets, and we'll have like Theo Von, Wallen, Eddie, and then this guy. That's gonna be the.
I love it.
mullet heads.
After we win Theo Von to socialism, I don't think it'll be too hard.
There are going to be 2 official haircuts in Socialist USA. It's going to be the fade and the mullet. That's it. Nothing else. You
Fair
either
enough.
get a fade or a mullet.
Which we're actually gonna do what they say North Korea does and enforce like 2 haircuts or something.
But we'll be for real about it.
Yeah, that's what communism is.
So I went to Erie, Pennsylvania to find out. Are we rolling? Okay.
By the way, Erie's like an hour from me. And I have good friends in Erie who voted Trump and are just like these people. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Support my 45th president. He didn't lose. He called out the Washington establishment, and I absolutely loved it. You know, he's definitely not a Republican because Mitch McConnell and them would be backing him, and DeSantis would be running against him. Obviously not a Democrat no more. So we're more of a politically homeless faction that loves America, and we'll make all the changes that we can to make it great. Prices are just higher. Like you go to the grocery store, I buy the same thing every time I go to the grocery store. I spend $102 at Aldi's. I was just telling my uncle this. I'm spending over $200 now. So things are more expensive. I think people are more scared.
Our money doesn't have no value, and that's why people.
Real quick, can you pause it? This speaks to, and I know it's just anecdotal, this false notion that all of the Trump people are well off or something. Aldi's is a discount grocery store in the Cleveland area and the surrounding couple states. It's Aldi's and Save-A-Lot. There's an Aldi's like a 2-minute drive from me. That's where we shop. And yeah, it's all the groceries are double like everywhere else.
Yeah, Aldi's is fantastic. Go there if you're poor like us.
For real.
Inflation thing. It's been building and building for multi-decades, and it's getting close now.
You work at McDonald's, right?
I do.
Do you feel like you're getting everything out of work that you're putting into it?
I believe I should get paid more. All I am doing is I'm working my ass off to get my money. I'm a hard worker, and I feel like I deserve more.
I work down in West Virginia.
Yes.
On the rigs for evil Big Red.
Yeah. Oh my
Can you
god.
pause that real quick? And this is why, like, folks, like, I'd rather have 1 Chris Smalls than 1,000 leftists. Because that's all Chris Smalls needs to work with, and to organize a fucking union in the one red borough in New York. As he called it, it's called usually Trump Island instead of Staten Island. And he organized something that was unprecedented. They failed in Alabama. They failed somewhere else. I think it was in Staten Island as well. And he succeeded. Why? Why did he succeed? Well, as he told our friends RBN in the Labor Summit, which we had the pleasure and the honor to be a part of, it was because he organized based on class. He didn't put petty disputes on other fucking things get in the middle of the way of the class struggle. He didn't come to his coworkers with a grocery list of social positions that they had to check off before he can start to organize with them. He said, you're getting screwed by the company. I'm getting screwed by the company. Let's fucking do something about it. And that's a formula for success. But the purity fetish left, as Jones Manol and Parenti and Losordo had already noted, I quote this in my book, they have connected to that purity fetish is a fetish for defeat. Only in losing, and in losing very early, can purity be sustained and that purity not be desecrated. So they're condemned to constantly lose, and we have to break through that. Instead of following any of these leftists online that are, hating on regular working people because they don't have the perfect views, follow someone like Chris Smalls. That's who the real movement of history is with, and people like him.
People like this guy working at Big Red.
I was just gonna say, people just like John Russell here, my buddy, who's been hammering this home for the last year or two on TikTok, and now he's working for More Perfect Union, which I'm happy to see because he's a great dude and he has the right idea. You know, he's been trying to say like the revolutionary sentiment is there. It's somewhat dormant, but it's coming to life, you know, among the working class South, and a lot of the Marxists and leftists are completely missing it because they're so wrapped up in their purity fetish outlook.
Look, I guarantee you, if I went to this guy that's on the screen right now and said, let's organize a union because we're all getting screwed at this Halliburton rig he worked on, he would be down. And I guarantee you, after we did that, if I said, you know what, we need more, this ain't enough. It's the ruling class that's the issue. Why don't we continue this way? Take it to every other workplace and get all of them on board and just take the government back. I guarantee you he'd be down. You know who wouldn't? The purity fetish left, because there would be people they can't abide their disagreement with, right? With opinions that don't matter for the real movement of history.
And just real quick, I'm sorry, I hate to do this because we're what 2 minutes and 40
No,
minutes.
you don't. You love to do it.
I do love to do it secretly. But objectively, what are they doing when they do that? They're dividing. And what was the ideology that in the last period was essential for dividing workers? It was racism and other forms of bigotry. But they can't do that anymore because the social consciousness of the American people has changed. So they have to find a new way to divide people, and they do it through this form of Wokism. And that's what Christian Parenti, the son of the legendary Michael Parenti, who's also an amazing intellectual in his own right, that's why he says diversity is a ruling class ideology. Not because diversity is bad, diversity is great. It's one of the great things about the U.S., the diversity that we have, the multiculturality that we have. But it's this form of bourgeois DEI diversity that's aimed at dividing people, and it feeds fundamentally into what the ruling class knows that is essential in order to continue to remain in power. And this was already, as Parenti shows, in Madison's Federalist 10. Like, you have to avoid a faction that's composed of the people against what he considered to be that thing which always factionalizes people, which is, inequalities in terms of property. How do you end up dividing the people that end up composing that faction of the masses against the property owners? You do that by factionalizing them. And how were they factionalized in previous periods? Through racism, through sexism, through other forms of bigotry. Now this form of wokeism is playing an essential component in that same factionalization, because the leftists are saying, I can't organize with that person. He voted for Trump, and therefore he's the agent of a fascist threat, or he's a bigot, he's X, Y, or Z. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, they called it the leveling impulses of the masses in the Federalist Papers, and they were already working against it even then. And it just changes form as the working class fought back against what divided us over the last 200 years of history. They've had to take that fight and what we've won into account, right? And so it changes. And these sort of last period leftists are stuck in history. They're not in the present, right? Because that's where their class was. And it's where their class interest is. And if you look at what Marx says about these middle-class socialists, he calls them the reactionary socialists, doesn't he?
We were the lowest paid of all the workers out there. I only made $13.50 when I got hired on.
For Halliburton.
For Halliburton, yep. Probably wouldn't even have an Iraq war if it wouldn't have been for the Halliburton and Cheney and stuff. We were expendable.
So not even just class consciousness in their own interest, but anti-imperialism.
Right there.
Like, do you see how close this is to a Marxist-Leninist line? It's like they're taking the Marxist analysis of capitalism and expanding it to the Leninist analysis of imperialism. Right? They see it.
That's all.
They're closer to Marxism-Leninism than to the traditional social democratic Western Marxism that we've had dominate for the last 100 fucking years.
Part of the machine, and the machine can be replaced.
As expendable as, people who went over to fight a rich person's war in Iraq.
Yep, pretty much.
in 5 years ago, I came to the realization that I've been hoodwinked. I have zero respect for Dick Cheney. I have zero respect for George Bush.
What did it for you there, and why did you end up going towards Trump?
It was a lie.
And this
they lied about the Iraq war. There was no reason for us to go into war in Iraq other than the military-industrial complex wanted a war.
The global corporations, they have, the Goldilocks question: too much, just enough, or too little power. Where would you?
I feel like their only thought is more money,
right?
More power. That's all you care. Whoever has the most money.
Obviously, it's too much.
Yep.
When you have a company like BlackRock that's worth $9 trillion,
and Vanguard's what?
Vanguard's $8 trillion. Obviously, I'm not going to argue. There's a problem with that.
Do you think the finance sector?
Yeah.
Does it have too much power, just the right amount of power, not enough power?
Way too much power.
Marxism, Leninism. They're talking about the exact way in which finance capital dominates our government in the modern era. It's not only them like approaching a Marxist-Leninist analysis, but it's them applying that analysis to modern day. And saying that in America, our country is dominated by finance capital, which controls what's called the deep state, oftentimes, which uses our tax dollars to fuel endless wars that help the finance capitalists, which is bankers and finance capital merged together with industrial capital. They understand it perfectly, and they understand the level of control and power that the military-industrial complex has in our modern neoliberal system.
Financial sector.
100%. Yes.
You got something, Carlos? Sorry.
Yeah, just real quick, and like a materialist analysis of this would show how it is that this process of consolidating the financialization of capitalism, what it does is end up making that class struggle more acute and more visible, the parasitism of the ruling class. And this is something that Radhika Desai's work on geopolitical economy does superbly. And there's a few others that do it as well. But, a question that should always come to the mind of a Marxist trying to analyze the world is not just, cool, this is being said. How can I describe this? How can I understand these different superficial phenomenon in their relationship to each other and even in their movement? But it's like, what are the material forces that are grounding these ideological reflections, these positions and ideas that the people have? What are the transformations that are occurring in the forces and in part in the relations of production that are leading to people thinking in ways that they wouldn't have been 30, 40 years ago?
And it also ties into what I was thinking this whole time, what these guys would understand, reproletarianization. Because it's based in that consolidation of finance capital. We had a comment a minute ago, though, that I want to reference real quick that said that if you say the word communist to these people...
Can you pull it up, Noah? Or do I need to pull it up for you?
Yeah, no, I can pull it up. It's right...
I was just curious if you wanted me to pull it up, but...
Oh, it's right here. They say, but if you toss the word communism at them and they would freak and disconnect with their own words. I do this all the time. I'm very open about being a communist. None of my coworkers care because they see the problem with them hearing the word communist is the substance under that label is this fake left mixed with a media lie about crazy cartoon villains, right? And when you just show them just organically that what a communist is instead is what's exactly in the paper I wrote on it that we'll be publishing very soon. So like the most upstanding person in their workplace or in their community, the person they can always depend on, etc., that fights for them and helps them fight, then they already know that what they thought a communist isn't that. And so it's super easy to just go, dude, communism is just us taking power. That's it.
Right. Yeah, this is why I've been disagreeing more and more with the idea that we should blunt our language or stop calling ourselves communists to reach people. Like maybe build into it, but like if people see that communists aren't what the media portrays them as, then they'll start to change their opinion. And I realized this the more I organized, like when I was standing on the picket line the last 2 days, they see me, a communist, and other communists in the community coming to support them when there's an issue with the workers, when the workers have a grievance with their boss. So maybe they don't consider themselves communists, but they see that the main people in the community standing up for them are the communists. And then that changes their opinion to one that's more positive. And I noticed the Democrats were doing the same thing. There were Democratic politicians who were there talking about how they were with the local Democrats so that they can boost their party, so that they can change how people think of their party. We as communists should do the same thing, right? We shouldn't back away from the label. And if people get scared of the word communism, fine. We will change the way that they view it with time through our actions.
And one of the
just real quick, Mo.
1, 2, 3, no.
They already distrust the people who told them to hate communists. That's the most important thing here. The people who told them to hate communists, to hate socialism, that socialism has always failed, they already distrust them. It's the only time in American history where only 11%, 1-1, about to hit single digits. 11% of people, only 11% of people trust the media. That means that 89% of the people agree that what bourgeois media is telling them is bullshit.
Oh, you're muted, Carlos.
I still can't hear him.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
That is the best conditions we can have to tell them, not only should you distrust them about these things that you're already distrusting them about, but if they lied to you about this, do you think they'll tell you the truth about a society where working people are in power? Do you think they'll tell you the truth about a form of analysis that prioritizes working people like you and that aims to achieve a society where you are the one that's in power, that is actually of, by, and for the people? You think they'll tell you the truth about that? So it's, if 11% of the people trust the media, that means that 89% feel that what they're being told is bullshit. And it's just a matter of showing, hey, not only are they bullshitting you about this, but also about communism. These same people that have gotten you to immediately, spontaneously hate communism, you already distrust here. Why would you trust them in this area?
That's all I was going to say is, if you don't trust them on every single other thing, why on earth would you trust them about one single issue, one single topic, the one that's been the biggest threat to their power in all of history and still is today?
Right, and that's something you can tell people if they're class conscious but scared of communism. Right, just say, Eddie's trying to Pavlov conditionals with the soundboard. That's hilarious. But you could just say, the media is lying to you. You know that it's fake news. Why would they be telling you the truth about China? Why would they be telling you the truth about communism? Of course, they're lying about that too, because all that communism is overthrowing them and creating a workers' society.
Really, a lot of these people, they don't realize are unelected officials. So all these politicians have this plan for how they're going to fix the economy, but then they just get in there, they don't do anything, and they're funded by the people, and those people are not elected, and they control the people that are elected.
What role do you think, the consolidation of these large corporations? I came from an agricultural background, and now it'll be 3 or 4 companies that control the entire market for chicken, eggs, beef.
That shouldn't happen.
Yeah, the working class has gotten beaten up because of the loss of small businesses. And my question would be, I would say, why aren't they here anymore?
As a small business owner.
And I mean, there's where I would also say it's not just small businesses, although, the middle class has been destroyed, as Noah talks about in his theory of reproletarianization. But a lot of these big giant industries, like steel and, extractive industries, manufacturing industries, have outsourced jobs through TPP and NAFTA, which have, gotten rid of protectionist trade tariffs and allow capitalists to outsource jobs to countries that the US, the IMF, and the World Bank are imperializing and making sure that they implement austerity and neoliberal economic policy, so they have free reign to extract resources from over there or produce resources over there and then just ship them back and sell them in America or ship them to wherever they're going to be sold. So that's led to the heartland being deindustrialized, all these jobs being outsourced. And this is a huge reason why so many of these people voted for Trump, because Trump was running against Hillary Clinton, whose husband, Bill Clinton, spearheaded, was it either NAFTA? Or, it was NAFTA, and I think TPP came later under maybe Obama was the one pushing that. But he was the one who signed a lot of these free trade deals that allowed for these people's jobs to be outsourced. Right. So the solution to this very practically is to nationalize those industries and start reinvesting in the American heartland, start reinvesting in jobs for people, so that they have opportunities and job prospects rather than no job prospects and a bunch of pharmaceutical companies trying to sell them opioids, which is what's flowed in as the jobs have flowed out.
Absolutely. And I can already anticipate the leftists hearing this saying, oh my God, that's so goofy. Small business. He's rooting it in small business. What, as Marxists, do we understand being the root cause of small businesses failing and those petty bourgeois people being proletarianized? What's the process that destroys small business and just sharpens the contradiction so that class position, more and more people are proletarianized? It's the natural development of capital. So what he's seeing is an effect of something that has its cause in the capitalist system and its natural functioning. And, that small capital, I mean, we're not in 1918 Russia, and that's another thing that people do. They'll look up like the quotes that Lenin has and the statements that he has about petty bourgeois mentality and the kulaks and the petty bourgeoisie. And, we're not there. Like, small businesses are not our main enemy now. On the contrary, like, they materially find themselves on the same side as us because the people pushing them out of business are these giant monopolies that fucking own everything. The media, the food we eat, the homes that we live in and have to rent, So it's that he sees that, okay, it's not the perfect analysis, but it's almost there. We can walk him to the root causes of why the small businesses have been destroyed.
I do that all the time. It's so easy to do, especially since they're already primed to hate the crony capitalists and monopolists, right? It's very, very simple to talk about how when businesses were forced to shut down during COVID, for example, the monopolies and financial cartel came in and bought up all of that distressed property when the people without as much capital could not afford to keep going. It was a full consolidation. I mean, it is wild how much closed and went out of business and what bought it. And it's all these sort of real estate investment firms that are owned by giant holding companies.
Right. And I really want to bring this up. This is the CPUSA's manual from 1935. Right. And as Carlos was saying, the class struggle here takes a different form than it did in Russia. Right. We need to make a unique class analysis. Think about, like, Lenin came up with the worker peasant alliance. That's because a huge portion of the Russian economy were peasants, and the Chinese communists adopted that idea as well, because that was a huge part of the economy. Peasants don't exist in America. They haven't existed for years and years and years, right? It's not a class that we have. So we need to make our own analysis of what are the allies of the proletariat. And that's exactly what's in the CPUSA manual from 1935, when CPUSA was a very effective party. And what do we have here? The poor and small farmers, right? They're not talking about the kulaks and, how kulaks are evil, so therefore all American farmers are evil, trying to use the analysis of Russia and just, superimpose it on top of the United States. No, they look at how agricultural workers can be organized. The Negro people, of course, having international solidarity. And what do we have here? The petty bourgeoisie, right? In this country, the petty bourgeoisie can go either way, right? They can struggle with socialists. They can recognize that concentration and accumulation of capital is what forces them out of business and allows finance capitalists to dominate. So, some of them will be bribed by the ruling class. Some of them will give into opportunism, right? Some of them will fall into reaction, but they don't have to, right? In the American economic system, in the American economic structure, in the way that American production is organized, the petty bourgeoisie can serve as an ally of the working class. And communists in this country have recognized this forever. So, don't just scoff at it when these people bring up small business owners. It's something worth analyzing. And that's not to say, petty bourgeois ideology and consumerist ideology can't be a problem or whatever. But in our system, the petty bourgeoisie can serve as an ally to the proletariat because they see that the finance capitalists, the monopoly capitalists, go against their interests and are the ones who truly control the government.
And this is all based on a theory that was developed, one of the only real awesome tactics, applicable tactics our party came up with, which was the anti-monopoly coalition. One of the concrete ways to fight finance capitalism, right, is creating a coalition against the monopolists. And I keep, while we're on this subject of the 30s party and stuff, I keep seeing some comments in the chat I want to address. One, like someone brought up Browderism, right? That we were talking about this before. Don't just listen to context for what these words mean. All of these terms have been manipulated and misused in our era. Browderism was a very specific thing that said that imperialism maintained progressive aspects of young capitalism. It wasn't just, American socialism, which is just the Marxist view. I've seen a bunch of these, like using reactionary wrong. Guys, please look into what all of these words actually mean.
Problem with that kind of operation.
Oh, 100%. Because the big guys are beating out the small guys or even the family-owned businesses, easily.
A lot of that's driven by these really large corporations that are, just by their size, pushing the little guy out.
Yes.
How big of a problem do you think that is?
That's an ultimate problem. That reminds you of watching them Westerns movies when they would go to some small town and the one guy owns the bar, he owns the tack place, he owns that. Yes. There's so many houses for sale in our neighborhood. I was going to go to town and say, are these all, can we find out, are these just real people buying them, or is this like proxies? See, BlackRock proxies, Vanguard proxies. Are they buying all these homes so people can't own them and they're just going to rent them?
Would you be excited if Trump did anything to rein in?
Well, of course. It's just...
it's a monopoly that needs to be broken up. Just like, remember the telephone company in the 80s, AT&T, that was broken up.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to be done.
Capitalism's not the problem. It's been corrupted to such a level, just like people think all the politicians are corrupted. But it's corrupted at the highest levels of these corporations, like you said, being owned instead of 200 of them.
Eddie, just real quick to mention something that that you always mention is that a lot of these people, like, why are they supporting Trump? Is it because of some of the more fucked up things, the more bigoted things he says? Or is it because he presents himself as an anti-establishment figure? And if he went farther with it and did the things that this guy's saying, of course I would love him to fucking do that. They would like him even more. And that's what a big chunk of the analysis that the left provides of Trump completely misses the mark. It doesn't understand why is it that a big portion of the country is following him. If you just slap on them the label of like a fascist threat and they're following him because of the bigotry, which is what the liberal media wants you to do, you're not going to understand what's going on. They're following him because they see him as an anti-establishment option. And if we had a viable alternative that's actually anti-establishment, maybe we could do it now with Cornel West, they would follow us. If there was a better alternative, viable alternative to Trump, and these people knew about it, I think a lot of them would switch votes because they like him in spite of the bad things, not because of them.
You're down to 4.
Yeah.
That's a massive control.
I think somebody like Trump with the billions in the business, I mean, we're talking about really large monopolies here. He's more in there, period.
Yeah, I agree. You're right.
He has a financial interest to do that kind of policy.
I always, even consider Trump even like a crony capitalist. He's not perfect. You know what I mean? He was a capitalist guy, you know, and you know, everybody always read where he eminent domain against take the lady, kick her out of her house for all that stuff. Yeah, that's falls into that. Like I said, I don't know. You know, I come to a Trump rally. Doesn't mean I think he's the greatest guy.
Can you really trust a billionaire? Help me understand why that's a thing for you.
Yeah, so with billionaires, I would say honestly, no, you can't.
Yeah.
I'll say with Trump, when he debated Hillary Clinton in 2016, she said all these things about the tax laws, all this, and Trump said, where have you been for 30 years? You know, you haven't done anything about it. And then he said, I know you're not going to do it because all your donors who fund your campaign benefit from the same tax breaks and tax laws I do. So whether it's left or right, these people, they're not really going to change the tax laws from the donors that are funding their campaign.
The power is so strong that these people have built up that, yeah, it's. And I don't have answers, and because I know that's what you want. You know, you want to hear what can we do. I just don't think
socialism.
Exactly. We have the answers. These people are ready. And if you're more interested in hating them and calling this guy here racist or evil or whatever, then get out the way. Stop using our symbols. Stop trying to call yourself a communist, etc., because you're not.
politics is going to do it. Just getting in like civil war.
Play a little more. I guess we're almost done.
Thing is just who wants to do that kind of stuff? You know what I mean?
I'm kind of in the same place. I don't have the answers. Will politics do it? If politics doesn't do it, what else will? I look out at a couple of 100,000 workers at UPS recently.
Yes. Did they vote on it yet?
So they haven't voted on it yet.
I heard about
MBK
that.
was negotiated, and there was threat of the strike. They were really organized. They won $30 billion over the term of that contract. By being organized. So I look at something like that and say, if this is about control and about working class people having a seat at the table at a company as big as UPS, we just saw their unity win $30 billion worth of cash in the pocket. Does that sit well with folks?
Nonviolent direct action does work. We didn't hear all about the boycotts. You just mentioned 100,000 people. That's a lot of people. You don't want to mess with that.
This contract was $30 billion. That was from workers standing together. Didn't have anything to do with government. Is that something you guys support?
Sure. Yes. Of course. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So if my coworkers wanted to make more, and since I want to make more, I'll probably organize something that can help make us more, like maybe a petition.
Yeah. Right. Or union.
So if you organize based on class lines, if you organize labor, how do these people just come to your side? That's what I was, one of the things I was noticing the past few days standing at this picket line is the amount of Trump people who came up and said, we love good workers. Like they'll support direct action, right? We have to get over these political divides. We have to get over the polarization that the two-party duopoly purposefully infuses into the working class.
Activity,
yes.
A lot of that. Yeah. Would you be really excited by Trump coming out and supporting workers who are doing that?
Yes.
Seeing Trump on a picket line?
Yes.
Yeah. Hot button issues. You can't get away from them. You never hear about UPS.
Today. No, honestly, I didn't know that. Please.
Why do you think that is?
So they just made a big move doing that too.
Because who's running the show? Listen, we lost our republic decades ago. We're living in an oligarchy. So they're the ones calling the shots because that's where the money's come from. The media, everybody.
You'll see things like the board or whatever they put on, the TV. You'll have
trying to divide people.
Yes.
A lot of the stories are trying to divide people.
Divide, keep them off the ball.
We're not supposed to be doing this.
Yeah, like it's
almost.
They want to.
It's almost like a fucking topsy-turvy universe. Like, what are these people trying to get at? Unity. What are they calling out? Dividing the people. Division. And what is a large chunk of the left doing? Division. It's almost the opposite as what's before. Like, you were left progressive and you were more progressive the more you wanted to unite the people to overcome the bullshit divisions that the ruling class proliferates in the people. And now it's the working class itself that's doing that.
Action, to be honest.
Yeah,
They want us to argue.
It is. That's
They want us to argue.
Facade of
Yes.
or there's two sides running around. There hasn't been two sides since the 1980s.
These are just the conversations that we had at one Trump rally, but you saw it. It did not take long to find people who agree that politicians should reject the money from billionaires, should break up massive corporate monopolies, end forever wars, and join workers on the picket line. And you would never know that if you just watched Fox or CNN. So let's try a thought experiment. What would it look like if for this one presidential election, we had conversations like these that focused on the working class, what they demand, what they need, what they deserve? What would the debates be about? What would the candidates' platforms be like? Who would ultimately win, and how would they be forced to deliver?
This is such exciting news.
Shout out to my buddy John there. That was a fantastic video. Going to the heart of Trump country and speaking to him directly, showing the coastal leftists what they need to see. So, love it. Yeah, you guys got any more comments to make before we start wrapping up the stream?
Yeah, I want to. This is a great question, but are these guys diamonds in the rough? I talk to these people all the time. They're not. This is typical of Trump supporters or voters or any working class people who aren't liberals.
I've talked to these people the last 2 days on the picket line of some service workers, who were protesting abusive management and abusive bosses. Right? These people were going out of their way to come to the protest and show solidarity with their Make America Great Again hats. This is a very common sentiment.
And we shouldn't just only organize these people. That's another mistake I see people doing. Oh, it's just it's the same sentiments exist in different forms in everyone who shares our class position and who struggles because of the decay of imperialism that we're experiencing in our era. So it's not just hit up Trump rallies and organize the working class people there that have anti-establishment sentiments. Hit up every other rally where working people are at, because you'll find the same sort of everyday immiseration that led Trump people to follow Trump in those other people as well.
Absolutely. Well, I think this was a really productive stream. Talked about a lot of good things. Got a lot of strategic commentary, I guess, or strategic analysis, which we need to think strategically. Some people just think morally. They just see something they don't like and they react emotionally. But take the time to think about it. Take the time to tarry with it, and think strategically about how we can improve our country and move the country towards socialism. Thank you to the 29 people who sent super chats. It might be a new record for super chats. That's freaking awesome. Really appreciate everyone. Our what we do at the Institute would be impossible without these super chats. The publishing press, the Midwestern Marx Academy, me and Carlos being able to eat. So really appreciate that. Can you guys do a segment on Trotsky? Definitely. We'll do that sometime. Definitely a NOAA area of expertise there. So yeah, any parting words for the people before we go, fellas?
Look under the surface. Always look under the surface. If there's some sort of popular slogan on the fake left, think critically about it. Don't just accept it because you heard someone say it. Don't even accept the way they use buzzwords because they've said it. Think for yourself. Learn what things are from yourself. You don't need anybody to tell you what time it is. You can get your own watch. Also, I am happy to do a Trotsky video. The one thing I'll say off the gate is he was a scumbag and the early 20th century version of the exact people we're talking about now.
I thought you said he was an early 20th century virgin at first. Owned. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Oh, go ahead, Carlos.
Frida Kahlo, she slept with Trotsky and then sided with Stalin afterwards. So that's about as much as you need to know. But no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, everything.
But seriously, I think if we can just sum it up real quick, it's in Che's dictum. You gotta love the people. You gotta be with the people, and you ain't gonna guide or lead or be the vanguard for anything if you are condescending, if you hate the people, or even if you're uncomfortable around the people. You gotta be there, be with them, learn from them, and that's the only way that you can lead, not forcibly, but lead with. It's about gaining the consent of the masses. I feel like I'm Jerry Springer or something. But seriously, there's potential in the American people and in American working class people specifically in general, whether they're MAGA, which are the most demonized by the left. That's why we focused on it on this stream. Or whether they're liberals or independents. There's tremendous potential, and it's not just going to happen fatalistically. It's going to be up to people who are conscious about these processes and the trajectory of history to take these movements and take them to where they ought to go. You know, as Lenin always said, and I'm fond of saying as well, you know, the ruling order may wobble all at once, but it won't fall until we topple it over. So it's at the end of the day, it's always going to be up to us doing what we have to do and getting our shit straight.
Facts, brothers. Well, thank you guys for doing this stream with me. Thank you to our moderators, Ware Pilgrim, Cobra Commander. I don't know if Jacob was here today, but really appreciate you guys. Appreciate all the super chatters. Kyle Pettis was a huge super chatter today. We'll have you on I know we were trying to get a stream done today, Kyle. I promise we'll do it this week. We'll do our labor stream and break down what's going on with the union movement specifically, so we can give you guys some more particular or more concrete advice for organizing and unionizing and what might be coming up in terms of strikes and places where you can show solidarity. If you want to know about what we're doing, follow us on all our social media platforms, Marks Midwest on Twitter, Midwestern Marks pretty much everywhere else, Instagram, and elsewhere. Make sure to subscribe or follow if you're watching on Twitch. And then if you want to support us financially, patreon.com/Midwestern Marks is probably the best place to do so. Or you can become a YouTube member. $10 YouTube members and Patreon supporters get a copy of Carlos's book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, which gives a real systematic analysis of the stuff we were talking about today and our critiques of the modern Western left. So, thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Solidarity.
Without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.